Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when you're watching this. If you're seeing it live, I'm in a different time zone than my first guest. And I am lucky enough to have for the premier first guest, Rich Schmig. Rich has been a friend of mine for a long, long time and runs a very successful production company in Milwaukee, Wisconsin called Plum Media. Rich, how are you?
I'm great. It's great to hear your voice again. Nice to see you again, Frank.
I know it's been so long. Hey, I have a quick question for you right off the top. When I was doing some research a little bit on you, you guys used to be Plum Moving Media,
Hmm.
and have we changed that now? You're not moving anymore?
We got out of the moving business. Yeah, we're strictly in media now.
All
Yeah.
right. Yeah. I was wondering,
Yeah,
I was looking at it, I'm like, oh, they used to be moving media. Now they're just media. So
we
it,
got so many emails from people where they just dropped the moving out of there. We said it makes sense. Let's get it out of there, shorten up our URL, and get on with life. So
well, if
we
you
did.
remember a few years back, I used to have a DVD company, right? And it was called Disc Cloners Plus, and people used to hate it because it was such a long name. You say, well, go to disclonersplus.com. You'd have to spell it out, you know. And yeah, that never works. If you can shorten it up and make it simpler, it always works the best, right?
Yeah, I don't know about the URL, but we love the company.
Yeah.
We miss him.
Yeah, good, good, good. Hey, so let's just jump right into it. Now, I know we could take up like all the time we have here right now with this first question. So I'm asking you to give me a Reader's Digest version for people that don't know you, which is hard to believe anybody doesn't know you. But if they don't, give me a short summary of your career. Where did you start, and how did you get to where you are today? And don't do it in real time, okay? Because that would be
Okay.
bad.
Well, let's if you got half an hour. No, I started. Yeah, okay. This actually goes back to when I was in high school. I was a geek in high school, so I was the whole electronics track, and I did all of the. They were into 1-inch black and white open reel recordings, so I would drag those things out and record football games and volleyball games. That's where it all started. But my first job was in Little Rockford, Illinois, working at the CBS affiliate there. And I started there working on the weekends doing teleprompter. And that was back in the days when teleprompter was this flatbed conveyor belt of paper. And you'd put a piece of paper on there and you'd roll it underneath the camera, and then that would go in front of the cameras that the anchors were reading to. So, I mean, technology's come a long way, thank God.
That's a while back, yeah.
Yeah.
So where did Plum come about? I know you were partner or are partners with Bruce Gibb, and how did you guys end up starting Plum? How did that happen?
Well, Bruce is retired a couple years ago, but he and I met here in Milwaukee at Channel 12. We worked together. He was with PM Magazine, and I was doing the weekend news and doing some other stuff during the weekdays. And so we would collaborate on some of his PM Magazine stuff. I would help put it together for him. And we just really liked working with each other. The way we communicated and the style and the way we approached stuff was really similar. So we always said to each other we should get together and start our own company. Timing didn't work out for years. It took us probably, I don't know, 6, 8 years before we finally made the jump to become what was then Plum Productions. And after that, everything just took off.
Yeah, I tell you, you guys have. I mean, you really have got a hold of the market, and I mean, anytime I talk to anybody, that's out there shooting or doing anything, they're always like, "Well, Plum did this, and Plum did." I mean, you guys got a great reputation, and I have not been to your new studio yet, and your new headquarters.
Get
But
over here.
I've seen enough of it. I don't need to see it anymore. It looks great. No, but you guys look like you have a beautiful facility. So let's jump ahead a little bit. I want to talk to you a little bit. The situation we're in right now is, and you and I had a chance to talk right before we went live here on Facebook, but um, the situation we're in right now, and you can tell what I'm doing. I mean, I don't do streaming. This is a first thing for me, and there's a long story on how I got to where I am, and we'll save that for a different time. But how do you think what's happening now in our current situation? I don't think this is going to ravel back up very quickly. How do you think? What's this going to do to our industry and the way we work, Rich?
Well, I think one thing that will happen is we might see a little less travel. There used to be a lot of travel in the corporate world, and a lot of meetings were handled on site. I don't think that's going away, but I think there will be greater scrutiny on which meetings are worth having everybody travel to.
Right.
I think the other component of that is when there is a meeting where everyone is gathered together at one time, there will probably still be a streaming component of that. Either presenters who are remote are able to join in and make a presentation to this audience in the room via some remote vehicle, or the entire meeting might be broadcast to the entire company or all your customers or whoever it might be, so that they can join in wherever they are remotely. So you have a bigger audience then. So you have people in the room and people online.
And you guys at Plum have been doing this kind of stuff for a while anyway, right? I mean, all it's going to be is an accelerated and a higher demand for this kind of thing, right?
Right. We've seen that ramp up quite a bit in the last few weeks.
Yeah. What's really funny, and just to kind of compliment your point there about this happening more, I applied because of what I'm doing here. I applied to LinkedIn. So LinkedIn has a live component, and I don't know if you've worked with that at all, but they have a live component. But in order to do a live stream, unlike Facebook, for LinkedIn, you have to apply, and you have to tell them what you're doing, what you're thinking, have you done it before, blah, blah, blah. And there's an application form that you fill out. So I filled that out just for this, and I got a kickback saying, because of our high demand, so evidently a lot of people are thinking the same thing, right?
Right. Well, it's amazing, and not only LinkedIn, but seeing how popular Zoom has become, and GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar, all those are really in high demand right now. Everything is just booming. There's no way that we can get together face to face right now.
Right.
The social distancing is really changing the way that we do business. So yeah, it's not a surprise that those platforms have all taken off.
Yep, you're exactly right. So now that we're talking about that, I mean, so you got Facebook Live, you got YouTube, you got LinkedIn Live now, you've got Instagram, whatever. How do you think, or how do you feel about what those things have done to our industry? I mean, you and I have been doing this for a long time, right? And, we've come all the way back from broadcast, things that were broadcast over the air, to putting it on a DVD, or we can go back to saying putting it on a VHS tape. I hate to really say that, but it's a VHS tape, then it was a DVD, now it's online streaming. And now you've got all these platforms that are out there. How is that affecting our industry too? I mean, and not only from the standpoint of distribution, but quality-wise. I think I've had this discussion with people about, now you got these, for lack of a better word, kids out there, holding their GoPro or their phones up and doing basically television shows or selling a product or doing things like that. How do you?
Well, let's not get carried away. I don't know if they're doing television shows. Some of them.
Well, all right. We'll go television shows. I'll do this. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. But yeah, I think certainly there are a lot more people broadcasting to a greater audience. There are a lot more avenues for people to use. You mentioned quite a few of them. To me, you mentioned the iPhone, and that's exactly where my head went. It's a little bit, for me, like chewing on tin foil. It just, some of them I watch them and I cringe. I can't take my eyes off either. It's like watching a train wreck sometimes. So I think, yes, we're going to see a lot more of that. I think what's really going to net out of this whole thing is that people will come to realize that the quality of a broadcast is part of what's essential to any kind of communication that we're doing. The same goes for video. Quality is a big component of it, but also it's not just the quality of the video, but the quality of the content. And so if you don't have content that people want to be a part of, that they want to listen to or interact with in some way, then it doesn't matter how good your picture is. If they don't want to hear it because you're delivering it poorly, then they're going to tune out. Likewise, if you have great content, but if you can't hear them because the audio quality is bad, the microphone's not working, or the camera's on the other side of the room, face the wrong direction, then lots of handheld stuff, where you see the person doing this all the time.
And Rich, don't you think it's funny because I used to make this argument to people all the time. I used to say, if the message is there in that, it's great, but if the quality is not there, it becomes a distraction. And my worry is because of the fact that there's so much of this happening now. And and you can probably attest to this, coming from the broadcast news, whatever. That God, engineers or anything would never let anybody now, put up a video. Now people are sending in videos from their phones or sending it in, and people are looking at this stuff. And is it kind of lowering our standards from the standpoint of what we'll accept and?
I think it is. Is that it's not necessarily a bad thing in every way. I think it does reduce our standards. I think the key thing, though, is what image are you trying to portray? And if you're the chief executive of a major company or even a minor company, you should want your image on screen to be as good as the image of your company. And that's not just the video, not just the audio, but the content of what it is you're saying. So think about what it is you're going to say. Think about how it's going to be delivered. Now, if we're just talking about school menus, then yeah, my iPhone is probably fine for that.
Yeah, I think, that I think you're right on that. And truth of the matter is now, if you flip the coin, it also gives us a lot more freedom, right? I was just on a video job where I was shooting, and somebody had an iPhone 11, and I was shooting some stuff, and they came back to me and said, "Hey, I shot this stuff, and I turned the camera the right way, and I shot it at 1080p, and blah blah blah." And they actually, wasn't anything fantastic they had to shoot, but it was great because I wasn't able to be over there, and they shot this piece, and I used the piece when we cut it together. So, it gives you a little bit more freedom, and
well, and I think it's supplements, and I think that's a key thing. You've got a great camera, and you've got a great eye. You know exactly how to capture a story, but you like, to your point, you weren't able to get over to that one area and cover that thing, so that gave you a little bit more coverage in a place that you might otherwise have missed. Yeah. Same with live streaming. If you're doing some kind of corporate town hall, for example, it's great to have that executive on screen if they're in the room or if you can get a nice signal to them. But there are other people who can tell part of that story as well, and so bringing them in remotely, maybe it's an iPhone hookup or some kind of they don't have great bandwidth in their area. I don't know what kind of internet they're using, or maybe they're on 56K dial-up modems or something, but at least it's a way to bring them in. They don't have to tell the entire story, but they can tell their little part of it, and we can get them in and out and still maintain good quality over the rest of the program.
And it's funny you bring that up, and it's another thing I want to talk to you about, and it worries me a little bit. With broadcast television,
56K modems, that would bother me too.
Well, with broadcast television, I look at now our dependence on the internet for transferring media, for streaming media, I mean, I cut the cable cord a long time ago, and basically all my media, all my entertainment, all my news, everything comes over the internet on my television. And I'm wondering, what if? And Jimmy Kimmel was on the other night and said, this is really tough, everybody, but just think how bad it would be if the internet went down.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my God, you're right. I mean, if we ever get a major disruption in our internet, wow.
That could really be damaging, could be crippling to the country. Let me turn it around on you. How has your bandwidth been affected? You think about the kind of bandwidth and speed you had 2 weeks ago even, compared to what you're experiencing today. What have you seen?
No, I think you're right. Well, I haven't seen much here. I mean, as far as an interruption or a slowing of what I'm doing. Actually, I was going to do this from another condo in our complex here that my sister and her brother-in-law owns. And I went over there. It was funny.
Steal their internet? Is that what you're doing?
What's that?
You're going to steal their internet?
Yes, I was going to steal their internet. Well, I want to get out of here because I didn't want Maria to have to kick Maria out when I'm doing this, because she can't be quiet. But what I wanted to do is go over there, and I did a speed test, and their speed test, they were only going like 3 or 4 megabits up and like 10 down. And here I've got, I think, probably almost 12 or 15 up and 100 down. And I'm thinking, I can't do it over there because, I could probably do it, but it would make me nervous that, I'm going to get a skip or whatever in here. But
you just mentioned a very important thing that I don't think people are really aware of, and that's the whole speed test thing, how critical it is to do that if you're going to jump on some kind of streaming conversation like we are now. But like, what parameters are you looking for?
Yeah.
I think you have to look for a pretty robust bandwidth, both up and down, to make sure that this conversation will go smoothly.
And it just keeps getting, more and more, right? I mean, if you think back to what it used to be like, you had joked about, the dial-up modems, if you think about what we were dealing with back then. And now, you're like, oh, if I don't have 10 going up, this isn't even worth it. I mean, that was unheard of, 10 years, 15 years ago, right? So it's crazy.
We've come through a lot.
Yeah. So let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about your relationship with clients. I always I love to hear people's philosophy on this, but what one thing, because we'll leave this because I'm sure there's probably a list, but what one thing do you wish when you sat down with clients, old and new, right? And the ones, or your older ones, kind of you educate as you go along, I understand. But what one thing do you wish they knew, about our business when you're producing a video with somebody?
Oh, okay. This is an entire program unto itself.
Yeah, I
know. The one thing I wish they knew about our industry was that it seems like it costs more to hire a professional, but it actually, in the long run, costs less because you're hiring someone who's got experience, and with that comes efficiency. So we're able to do things very quickly. We can capsulize the story that you want to tell in a beautiful way with great pictures, lighting, audio, and tell it in a concise manner by editing it down to just the important things you need, and also using graphics to enhance that story. So as opposed to, if any of our corporate clients tried to do this themselves, and some are doing that right now because they have to. You can't get too close to each other. There's a lot of social distancing right now, so they're forced to sit down in front of a computer and try to hack something together, and they're finding that it takes a long time to do all that, and trying to find the right sound bites to tell the story is more of a challenge than they think. Someone who's got experience can hear those sound bites right away and know to pull those out. That's just give us trust us. We can pull this together.
Do you think clients are more budget savvy now, or do you think they're more budget conscious from the standpoint of, well, my brother-in-law can do that with his iPhone 11. He can go shoot the video and blah, blah, blah. So why do I need to pay you this much money to do this? I mean, do you run into that?
Yeah, of course. Since iPhones came out, I think we've run into this since the VHS camcorder came out. That absolutely happens, and it goes back to the quality, and not just the quality of the picture, but the quality of the story you're telling. What is it that you want your audience to know? Sure, your brother, your cousin, your nephew, somebody could put that together for you. How long is it going to take them to do, and have they really covered all the bases as they're going through this thing? And not just, how is the picture quality, but, what about the legal issues? Have you thought about what it is that the people on camera are saying, and can they be used? Can you use those comments? Or do you have to worry about being sued by somebody?
And I think, I've run into that 100 times. So I'm just a DP and a videographer, right? So I don't produce anymore or anything. But I'll go out and somebody will say, well, my son, he has a video camera and he can shoot this, and I've lost jobs for that. But what I have noticed, I think in probably 8 out of 10 of those jobs, they eventually come back, and it's not because the quality was bad of the picture or whatever. It's because they don't know how to tell the story.
Yeah,
they don't.
Do you find, you've been in this situation where you're losing work to these people? Do you find that when you have that struggle with a client trying to convince them to use your services, and they finally do, then getting them to repeat that is much easier, because then they realize the value of what it is that you bring to the equation.
You've shown them what it is, and see that I'm lucky on my standpoint that I get hired by companies like yours to shoot as a freelancer, right? So I'm not in an office very often trying to sell them on my work. That's usually the producer or the company that I'm working for is in there doing it. But they come back to me with feedback, and luckily I've been, lucky enough that we go in and we do a job and they're like, oh my God, they were overjoyed with that. Everything's great. And then all of a sudden budget becomes less of an issue. And now it's like, well, you guys do it right. So, it's really not a budget thing anymore. So let's move on to, I want to talk a little bit about new media stuff. Now I've done a little bit, and I have a 360 degree camera. And I actually, about 6 months ago, shot an entire video in New York, upstate New York, with this little 360 degree camera. And I didn't cut it together. It went to the producer, and they cut it together and and they loved it. And what their application was is, at a trade show, they were going to have 20 stations with Oculus on, and while they were doing this installation of all this high-tech gear, they were saying, okay, well, if you look at Bill's on the other side of the room, and they turn their head, and I was able to see this, everybody turning at once, look at this way, and when it was really interesting. But do you think it's a novelty? Do you think there's a like an ongoing application for like 360 video moving forward? I'm not sure. I can't predict it.
I think there is. It does border on novelty. You have to have the right need for it. Where I've seen it being used a lot is when you have people who are not able to get to, let's say, a building of some kind to see what's going on inside the building. How is the factory floor laid out? So you can capture that on 360, and people can take a tour of that factory without actually being there. And they're able to look all around and see what's going on overhead and down below and behind them. I think in those kinds of cases, it's very helpful. Likewise, another application for 360 is doing a graphic application. Do the same thing, have a completely rendered room of what something will look like. How will this thing actually come together? And that's where 360 can really be beneficial. So people can visualize something before they actually get there.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's hard for me to decide. I found some applications where I think it's great, but then I look back at like 2-3 years ago at the National Association of Broadcasters conference, and everybody there had 3D TVs, and everybody had 3D and whatever. And where is 3D now? Right?
Well, I think 3D is a novelty. That's something I have a harder time finding a justification for. We've done quite a bit of 3D, but it really is kind of, it's one of those things, you get the glasses on and you see this thing come to life. It's not something you can just send somebody a YouTube video on. A 360 video, you could send them a YouTube video and let them watch it that way.
Yeah, it's funny. YouTube and Facebook both support that. But it hasn't gone like wide, right? I mean,
right.
It's still, it's still that I can't remember what they call the 2-image video for it. But Facebook will support it, and I've put them up. In fact, I put some up this week while I was out and about. I put some stills up and a little video up. But yeah, it's one of those things that's just a hard one to see where that niche is going to be. You can see applications for it, but I kind of agree with you. I think it's got a bit of a novelty to it, right?
Yeah, it is. It's much cooler though than an old-fashioned slide carousel with 8-track music playing.
Well, what's funny is I think it puts control into the viewer's hands, right? Now, if I want to look at this, I can look at this. If I want to look over here, I can look at this. And a lot of times you're guiding them to do something, but it still puts it in their hands. And I think maybe that's kind of a little bit of appeal to that they have a little more control over what they're watching, right?
Right, and you mentioned guiding them. That's something that we've done quite a bit of. You get in that 360 realm, and you're looking at video. But how do you know where to look when you're the user? And we've done things, popped up little visual cues, to tell them look over there, or be sure to check to your right where the door is and see who's coming through.
Right. And
that has always helped the effectiveness of a 360 video for us.
So what about some of the other stuff? What about like 4K? And 4K came in, and I still shoot 1080, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with 4K, and I've always gotten this argument with some other DPs saying, well, if you're shooting 4K, man, we can shoot 4K, and then I can punch in for a close-up, and I'm like, well, what do we need a DP for then? Then we just lock the camera down and let the post-production guy pick what shots he wants, right? So, 4K, you guys are 4K there, aren't you? You're using 4K?
We're 4K. Yeah, we've been shooting 4K now for several years, 4 or 5 years now, I think. We shoot almost everything in 4K now, for exactly the reason you mentioned. I mean, that's one reason. But the first and foremost reason is the quality of the image. And we do a lot of shows. And when you're on a show site, we're not always working with a 1920 by 1080 image. Sometimes it's a 1080 tall, but it's 3,500 pixels wide. And so you need the highest resolution you can get. So 4K helps us get there. We're looking at 8K. Do we make a jump to that camera now or not? We're holding the line on that one.
I was just going to say, you got first we had 1080 HD. Look how long it took broadcast and everybody to go HD. I mean, God, that took forever. And now 4K, well, I know there's people out there that are doing it, but it's not prevalent on the broadcast side or whatever. And then I've heard arguments about, I really, unless I'm on a certain distance and whatever, I don't really see that much of a difference between it. And I understand from your application that makes sense, right? If you're blowing something out up to billboard size, it makes a big difference. But
We'll see. And I agree. I think as a consumer, it's hard for them to tell the difference between an HD picture and a 4K picture.
Yeah.
I can tell. I've got a 4K set at home, and I can tell right away if I'm watching something in 4K or if it's a regular HD picture. But I don't think consumers are going to see that, so I don't think it's really going to take off from a consumer standpoint. And likewise, that who are our customers? Well, they're also consumers, and so I don't know that they always see the benefit of shooting in 4K. Like I said, we do it as a matter of course because we're future proofing. If the day does come when everything is 4K and HD goes away, we'll already have a big archive of footage in 4K. Also, the stuff we're working on right now, some of those budgets are lean and mean. We can't send a second camera crew, so we're doing exactly that. We get that wide master shot. We're able to punch in on a couple tight shots if we have to and make that budget stretch just a little bit further if needed.
Yeah.
But the other main reason, like I said, is because of these shows we're doing, those super wide screens.
Sure.
You have to have that in 4K.
And that's definitely it. I think the thing kills me is when you're watching broadcast TV and they're like, and now the Jay Leno show in 4K or Jay Leno, geez, am I dating myself? That was 2 years back. But whoever's doing their talk shows now in 4K, and I'm like, yeah, I don't need to see really want to see the pores of their face or anything. There's not much to it. For medical applications and things like that. I mean, I think it's amazing, right? For anything where that precision and what you need to see, and for computer graphics, I'm a big fan of computer graphics, and I love seeing that super sharp graphic and things like that, especially in shows like you guys do. So we've got on demand, and the other thing I want to comment on is distribution. I mean, our distribution has changed radically, right? I mean, my God, I remember having to go back and we'll make you a copy of the tape, and whatever, and then we'll make a copy of the DVD, and then we'll put it on a hard drive. And now, I think a lot of stuff that I shoot, I still put it on a hard drive and I transfer to people. And that worries me a little bit. The solid state hard drives are going to last for a long time, but some of the other hard drives, they sit on a shelf and archive for a while. What do you guys do for archiving? What are you archiving your footage with?
Well, a lot of the archive is going to LTO, but we're still using tape, and I bet there are probably people in our audience still using tape today. We have a big stack of VHS tapes or beta, and we stack them up, and then we put our computer on top of those so we can get the camera at eye level. So yeah, we're still using them.
That's good.
But no, all of our stuff gets backed up to LTO. So we have a hard cartridge here, and then everything is also getting backed up to the cloud. We have a cloud server so that everything is backed up. It's a dual redundancy.
And
just to make sure everything's safe.
What's your distribution like when you finish a client program, unless it's being used at a show or something like that, or say, okay, well, we would like to do that. Are you uploading it to their servers, or what's usually happening?
No, it's all VHS. Everything's VHS now.
Yeah. Yeah. We sketch a flip book and we send the flip book over.
They're all electronic files. So for a show, we will distribute it. We have a box account, so we will distribute it to usually the people on show site via box, do the handoff that way. Occasionally, if the files are really large, and that's not uncommon, then we'll ship a drive someplace. But for most of our clients, they're playing these videos back either on their own intranet, or they're putting it on YouTube so that their customers or employees have easier access to the videos. So in those cases, some of our clients are giving us their YouTube account information, and we're just posting it directly onto YouTube, saving them a step. Same with intranet. We have a couple clients where we have internal access, and so we're able to help them out. I mean, there are a lot of steps involved, especially when it's not just putting a video on there. There's all the back-end information that you need as well, thumbnails and keywords and all that stuff that has to, you really do need, I have to jump on a platform here and say all that other stuff is as important as the video, because if you don't have great keywords and a good thumbnail, people aren't going to watch your video. So put your effort into that, and that will get them to watch your video.
Well, Rich, we've come up on a half hour, believe it or not, and
wow.
I don't want to bore people too much more than we already have. But I hope we actually have some listeners here. We had some people sending in comments and things, and I'm going to save that for a different one, because I have my hands full here with flipping cameras around and doing all kinds of things, so I'll save those for later. But last question, okay? Easy
Okay.
question. Tell me something you're really, really good at.
Okay. What am I really good at? I'm really good at eating. I could eat food like nobody else's business.
Especially
I
now.
love good food.
Right, especially now. All right, well, listen, thanks, Rich. I really appreciate you doing this for the first one of these. Hopefully, I've got this Friday. I'm actually going to be interviewing Mark Metcalf.
Wow.
Yeah,
Really? Oh, that's cool.
yeah. I met him years ago. We did an independent film together, and he's in Ohio right now, believe it or
Yeah.
not. But he has agreed to do a interview with us, and we're going to talk about the state of movies and what's going on, and his career, and him being the maestro on Seinfeld, and all that fun stuff. So it'll hardly be as fun as this, but I'll do my best to do that. But I really appreciate you doing this for the first one, and it was really great to catch up with you and talk. And I hope you stay safe and the family stays safe, and hopefully I'll see you on the other side of this thing, right?
Yeah, you will. We will get to the other side.
All
I
right, buddy.
can't wait for it to happen.
All right, Matt.
Thanks a lot,
Nice
Frank.
talking to you. See ya.